We accomplished a great deal, and indeed, more, honestly, more than we had even expected, although very much along the lines of what we were trying to do. So, for starters, it's the first universal, lasting climate regime that is really applicable to all parties. I mean, there have been others that in some sense cover everybody, but not in the sense that everybody's actually taking action. So that's first. Second of all, really important with respect to ambition. We started off with the completely extraordinary fact that there were 186 countries that had put forward their targets, their so-called INDCs in the lingo, during the course of 2015. And then there was an architecture built around that in the agreement of 5-year cycles to ratchet those up. And countries either put in new targets, or if they're in the middle of a longer target period, they have to either revise it upward or reconfirm it in every 5 years. And the 5-year cycle follows a global stock take to see where we are in the aggregate vis-a-vis our long-term goals, vis-a-vis what science is telling us. So you've got an every 5-year stock take, and then about a year after the every 5-year stock take, countries have to either reconfirm and say, yes, I'm going to hold where I am, or I'm going to increase where I am, or if they're in the period of time where they have to put in a target anyway, obviously they do. So that was really important. We have very strong global goals, both. We already had a below 2 degree goal. We still have that, although even that's kind of ratcheted up to a well below 2 degrees, and an effort to pursue even further to go to 1.5, and a further goal of what is essentially emissions neutrality, no net emissions during the course of this century. So as much absorbed as you admit. So that's we're far away from that, but that's a very strong goal. And so you have universal, apply to everybody, really strong ambition, and then kind of the counterpart to or necessary feature of ambition is a strong, and in this case legally binding, transparency and accountability system. So countries have to do inventories according to international standards. They've got to report on those inventories and report on the progress they're making toward achieving their target. And all of that gets reviewed by expert review teams and also discussed in a kind of peer review session that will take place during the end of year meetings. So you have that. That's number 3, I guess. The fourth thing is that the architecture of the agreement with respect to the age-old problem that has bedeviled these negotiations, which is the division, but sort of the firewall between developed and developing countries, as set in 1992. The 2 categories were devised in the original 1992 kind of granddaddy treaty. And the problem has been that nobody is willing to move out of their category, and nobody has been willing to kind of evolve the nature of what that means. So the classic agreement that embodied that old division was Kyoto, which was all obligations were for developing countries not asked to do anything. And although we had moved gradually a little bit away from that, still not enough. So there was this very significant move embodied in this agreement away from that. And the perfect example of the kind of differentiation that we mean, and we're totally supportive of the idea of differentiation, because you can't expect all countries, different development stages and so forth, to do the same thing. But the kind of differentiation that works is what is embodied in the notion of nationally determined commitments, or nationally determined, in the lingo, nationally determined contributions for mitigation. So every country puts forward its own plan. That's the 186 targets I'm talking about. Everybody puts forward their own plan. They're urged, encouraged, sort of gently pressured to do the best that they can. And we actually had a particular procedural device that we proposed and that worked very, very well to make sure that those targets would be as strong as possible. But that's a differentiation across the spectrum of countries, not into kind of starkly different categories that don't make any sense as we go forward. To think that China and Korea and countries that are developing rapidly should be treated the same way as least developing countries obviously makes no sense. Developing countries right now are 65% of global emissions and rising, so you can't deal with the problem that way. Strong focus, stronger than ever, on the issue of adaptation, which is what countries have to do to deal with the impacts of climate change that are already upon us and that you can't avoid. And then I think good, balanced, continued strong provisions for financial and technology support. So that's kind of the package, and it was, as they say, remarkably robust. And there really was a kind of a coterie of countries that were aiming at a much more minimalist agreement. And to their credit, the French kind of had a true north, I think, in this negotiation, which was to produce a high ambition agreement. And of course, that's where we were, and that's where many others were. But it actually happened.